what are you guys going to be talking about?
So we have a bit of a different story, a different angle. We have a strange background. We're designers. We've been designers for a long time, and we've designed various physical and digital products, and not necessarily always in the space industry. So we're going to be sharing about how our background in design has helped us bring on board this unique approach to building space-enabled products and services. And our kind of main passion is around sustainable development. So we'll be talking a bit more around that area and how we're working with governments of various nations and NGOs and other space companies to really apply space-based applications in various development contexts.
Awesome. A very warm welcome to everyone joining us on YouTube for a Thursday night Space Door Live talk. Tonight in the house, we've got Fernando and Tuur, who are both innovation consultants at Impactspace. And tonight's talk is going to be on space for sustainable development. What is Impactspace?
Impactspace is a consultancy that we started just at the kind of start of the pandemic period, where we wanted to be, I guess, a bit more independent and free to choose the type of work that we want to do. So at the moment, it's just us as two steady employees, and then we are utilizing our vast network of brilliant people from the space industry for various projects that come in. And we advise space industry businesses who want to enter the sustainable development market, and we advise UN agencies and other NGOs to really understand what technologies they could utilize to move towards sustainable development goals and really build a better planet.
Awesome. Well, we're all really looking forward to your talk tonight. Do stay tuned in, because tonight's talk is going to be a little bit different on Space Door Live, because previously we've had a lot of engineers come on. We've had a lot of people with the technical approach to space problems, and tonight we're looking at it from the designing perspective and the user-centered approach. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm going to hop off now. Please do send in your questions via the comments in YouTube or the Q&A via Zoom, and hopefully in around half an hour's time, I'll pop back on and we'll try and get through some of your questions. I hope you guys have a good one, and I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, thanks so much. So awesome. I'll get started. I'll just give a bit more background as to who we are, introduce myself, let Fernando introduce himself as well, and then we'll get right onto the talk. So I actually joined the space industry about 4 years ago now, when I first came into the UK and joined the Satellite Applications Catapult. And ever since, I've been working as a design thinker, user experience designer, product manager, and all sorts of different job titles. So now innovation consultant. But all of these are just different kind of titles for very similar roles. So I look at how companies can come up with more innovative solutions, how they can understand their users better so that they could formulate better value propositions and design better products and services. And I've worked across sectors, including aerospace, agriculture, legal, apparel, and so on. And as said before, and as for the topic of the talk today as well, that sustainable development is really the key passion of mine, and an area that I want to dedicate my future towards. Fernando, would you mind introducing yourself as well before we get on?
Sure. Do you want to flick over one slide? Yeah. So, hi everyone. So, like Tuur, I have a very diverse background. I started off in architecture, worked in kind of 3D printing and scanning, did some brand branding for different design agencies, worked in kind of pretty much every sort of design discipline before I ended up working in space. And working in so many different ways and all of those different design processes that you learn in different design industries, I basically applied within the space industry. And that got me looking at the way that I would adapt processes and approach different projects, and really focusing most of the application design down to the user and understanding who you're designing for, really framing that problem and that challenge, and really understanding, is technology the answer to a certain challenge or problem, or can it be solved by other means? And I think that experience led me to working with different organizations, UN agencies, other governments, developing different satellite-based applications, app-based applications, and looking more towards humanitarian development and support. And I'll pass on to Thea.
Thanks. So as said in the introduction already, I have worked in the space sector as a design thinker and user experience designer. And these are really new, strange roles in the space sector that most space industry businesses wouldn't really think to for, or they wouldn't really understand what these roles entail or why they need experts like us. So I would just like to start by explaining quickly and simply what it means to be a user-centered designer in the space industry, and really, like, what is the paradigm shift in the industry that has resulted in the industry needing more experts like us. So most people who know stuff about space are familiar with the terms old space and new space. But as we have quite diverse audiences at the Space Store, which is great, I'll just quickly go through it. So old space, meaning activities that began in the first space age, starting in 1957 when Sputnik 1 was first launched. And this era was really typically characterized by large, slow, closed bureaucratic systems. The main players in the space field were large national space agencies of powerful countries and other large companies that had huge government contracts. So, stuff was expensive, and so space activities were largely bound to science, exploration, discovery, and security as well. And for decades, the state of space stayed relatively stagnant up until early 2000s when the second space age launched, so the so-called new space. And now the private industry started to come up with solutions that were competitive to the established government solutions. And they drastically reduced the cost of manufacturing and access to space, so launch services, as hardware was getting exponentially cheaper and smaller. And crazy changes have happened in the space industry in the last 20 years. So we now have more and more satellites, more and more data, and advanced ways of processing that data as well. And that means that there are so many more opportunities for real-world applications that are enabled by space technologies. So that includes agriculture, waste management, extractive industries, health and well-being, transportation, legal, finance, you just name it, anything. So the number of potential users of space-based or more advanced satellite-based information is now really massive. And in order to turn that potential number into reality, some old challenges must first be overcome. Primarily, the fact that satellite data is really complex. It's complex to acquire, it's complex to access, to process, to translate into something meaningful and actionable. So the current system it really relies on Earth observation scientists, on remote sensing engineers, and some other really clever people. And so I guess if the demand for this information increases, the more and more people are going to move into those careers as well. And that is absolutely fantastic. But how many of these experts, like proportionally, can you really have in the end? So something in the current system has to change to enable that widespread adoption and that scaling, to take advantage of the data in the best way possible. And that is where us user-centered designers come in. We work collaboratively with different types of end users to understand their challenges, their capabilities, and to really come up with alternative strategies and solutions that may not be instantly apparent and that are not necessarily industry standards or like the normal way of doing things. So the key difference here is that we are guided by problem statements first and not predefined solutions. And in our design and product development approach, we really take into account the users' values, their cultural background, their existing knowledge and behavior, and then we use that to define the performance, construction, and aesthetics of the product that we are developing. And we use different designerly processes and designerly methods and designerly frameworks to foster innovation and to not only come up with creative solutions ourselves, but to give people from all sectors the tools and the skills to think differently and come up with quite unexpected and new ideas. So when a traditional designer or engineer or product developer in the space industry usually asks, how can we best design this product with these features, then a user-centered designer asks, how can we solve this problem for these users? And actually the way you frame the research question or the design brief in the beginning really matters, because that will define the types of solutions that you come up with. And the end result may be using satellite technologies, but most often it's combined with other technologies and other programs to really take advantage of that capability in the best possible way. So in the broadest possible way, I have explained what user-centered design is, and now to the sustainable development part. Talking to some of my acquaintances and just people on the street, in the general public, there does sometimes seem to be a kind of perception that there's a lot of money wasted in the space industry pursuing activities in space, on the moon, etc., and that this money should be spent to improve things here on Earth. And many folks don't know how much space activities have really benefited people and the ecosystems on Earth and contributed to our well-being. but mostly they're so-called like secondary benefits. So when we're thinking, for example, supporting water purification efforts, eye laser surgeries, developing healthcare tools and products that can be used in remote locations. And I believe that actually a few weeks ago, Anna Raposo, a really brilliant engineer from the European Space Agency, gave a Space Tour talk on that exact topic. But what I really mean by secondary here is that they were first created for either the International Space Station, for astronauts, and then the benefits on Earth were later discovered as kind of an afterthought. But what we are really interested in is how do you purposefully use space technologies to benefit the planet, the people, and our fragile ecosystems as well. And the thing is that when your passion is to do good, then sometimes defining what that good means can be really difficult, especially when talking about international contexts and global understanding of good. And to tackle this, the United Nations dedicated actually decades of work and conducted various consultations with a lot of different experts. And they developed this 2030 agenda for sustainable development. And this is essentially a plan of action with measurable goals, measurable KPIs that define the direction that that humanity has decided to move towards. So these objectives are categorized under 17 strategic areas, also known as sustainable development goals. And whatever we do in our work is to contribute to those goals, because this is the best formulation out there at the moment to what good is and what is the planet that we want to build at the moment. A planet that is fair to people, fair to animals, fair to ecosystems, and is sustainable. And now I will hand over to Fernando to talk a bit more in more detail about how our work is contributing towards these goals and what exactly do we do to achieve this.
Thanks, Thea. So we heard a little bit about the UN sustainability goals. And when we look at a lot of the uses of satellite data, we often see a lot of Earth observation. So pictures that have been taken from space. And what that's doing is it's keeping a record of everything that's changed since the first Earth observation satellites were sent up. It's basically taken this record of image after image in consecutive years that we're able to play back almost like a time series. And you're able to start seeing the effects on the world from pollution, from deforestation. And the image that you're seeing in front of you is the Amazon rainforest and the amount of forest that has been lost in a decade. So when we are talking about complex problems, we're talking about the way that different uses of satellite data can be incorporated into organizations. The issue with many organizations and often a lot of barriers is that these development organizations have heard and maybe have used satellite imagery in their work in reports, but don't usually have dedicated staff to do image processing or to use a lot of that data on a day-to-day basis. The other kind of complex problem around satellite data is if it's very high resolution, meaning that it's a very sharp image of the Earth, then the data is often quite high. But the kind of misconception about that is that a lot of organizations feel that they need a very sharp, high resolution image in order to gather as much data as possible. But often you can extract a lot of data from low-res images that look a little bit pixelated, but after being processed, you can extract a lot of information from them. Another complex problem is the way that different organizations and government departments work. They often are siloed. They work for themselves. They hold a lot of data close to their chest. They don't want to share a lot of their information. And therefore, it makes it very difficult for us to achieve any of these goals if we don't all come together and collaborate. And often when you're working in development, and in development projects, there's a lot of differences in culture in different places of the world. You know, language barriers and different levels of knowledge of technology often makes it quite difficult for new organizations to go over to a developing country and speak about satellite technology and space data, because it's just quite far extreme from what they're used to using. They may be using a basic surveying system that they've been using for years, where a person goes out to a field and marks some data, puts it on a piece of paper, goes back to their computer and then types it all in. But what we're advancing with in terms of technology and geo-referencing and a lot of the amazing satellite imagery that has come over the last decade means that there's a lot of technology that can benefit them, but it's really communicating that benefit to them that is often the barrier. And in terms of different locations, there is a lack of internet connectivity, access to hardware. There may be a kind of restriction on budgets and what they can spend. So a lot of these complex challenges also come into play when we're trying to design for that specific user case. So it's really understanding who you're designing for. So the first kind of guide to designing any sort of geospatial or any sort of solution using space data is always put the people first. Really understand the people that you're designing this service for, what they're trying to achieve with this, what they're trying to solve as a challenge, and work with them. So this is an example of a project that both myself and Taya worked on in the Pacific Island states. And, you know, just by having conversations with lots of different organizations and really taking in lots of information across that landscape, we were able to start determining what was going on in terms of projects, what technology was being used, where the current gaps were, what kind of level of knowledge they had in terms of using satellite data, geospatial systems in general. I think the idea is if you can understand who you're designing for first, then you don't always jump to that tech solution. And often when you go down to the bottom level or bottom up approach, you know, speaking to farmers in a field, understanding their day-to-day practices, what they currently do, what technology they interact with, and really trying to understand where your data or your system could benefit, speed up, reduce cost, and really help is really important. So all of this means collaboration and co-creation is the best way for designers to really work in the space industry, working with different individuals and collaborating with them, facilitating the information sharing and knowledge sharing. What that does is it gets your partners inspired, it gets the people inspired about the solution that you're designing for them, but it breeds innovation. You know, when you're working together, you're starting to find some of the challenges and problems, but you're basically taking one complex issue and you're taking it out as far as possible so that you understand every step of it. If you understand every step of it, then you understand all of the points of intervention and where satellite data or any sort of space data could really help with what they're trying to achieve. Another good way and a fun way that designers tend to interact with high-end and kind of very important government officials and break down that barrier is Lego. So, you know, there's been lots of different design methodologies about different types of co-creation and working with stakeholders in workshops and being very tactile. And tactile activities often breed a lot of innovation. And Lego is a very good way of getting people to come out of their shell and really try to communicate complex ideas by building something in front of you. You know, not everyone is very skilled in the art of drawing. They may have some barriers in terms of writing or drawing something on a post-it note because they don't want to feel judged. Lego is a way of allowing everyone to use the same building blocks to build some sort of idea or complex and communicate that to the rest of the group. So communication, you know, is extremely important. I kind of spoke about this a little bit earlier, where there often is a language barrier working with developing countries, and really the best way to overcome that barrier is visual communication. So, you know, it's been said, a picture speaks 1,000 words. You know, if you're able to communicate something in some sort of diagram or an image, it often gets through and it begins this understanding between you and that stakeholder. As you're designing with them, you're drawing alongside them and they're starting to understand where you're trying to go and get to in terms of what kind of questions you're asking and what you're trying to elaborate on. And often when you collect a lot of this information and you come back from these trips to kind of developing countries, we've got into a kind of a whiteboard room, drawn up a lot of the information, and we start developing ideas. So collaboratively working on different ways of approaching the situation by drawing up scenarios, different ways that users would interact, different user tiers, and try to visualize a lot of how that may look, how they may interact with it, how it may work as a step-by-step kind of walkthrough, and iteration. So often with designers and how they approach tasks a lot differently than a lot of people in the space industry is we love to iterate. We'll do something, it's not quite right because we're all perfectionists. So we'll constantly work in an agile process in which we slowly design and test until we understand and get enough feedback to understand how we're building on that innovation. So we work with the people in these countries to really understand, is this what was meant by when we first spoke? And then you design and test that walkthrough with them to understand if this is correct. Are we going along the right route, or are we not quite there? So it's really understanding that relationship with your end users that designers often are better at in the space industry than the types of kind of organizations that go out to these countries with a fully blown technology system in which everything's already built, and they just want to understand what data needs to be input, and then it's basically ready to be bought or sold off. So data now from space is everywhere. You can see by this image that there is, thousands of satellites above us, and a lot of the satellites that are currently capturing data, either through satellite communications or Earth observation, so taking images of the Earth, they're used for different types of applications. And some of these are openly available, so you can download and access some of this data. And often the higher end imagery is a little bit more expensive. But what's happening now is, as there's more and more satellites, more and more data is become available. And what that means is that there can be more development of applications and services, but it also allows different types of people to interact with satellite data and start coming up with ideas and solutions that could benefit the Sustainable Development Goals. And often the case when you're working with a lot of developing countries, you'll find that developing a solution is often very complex. And when you're using satellite data, often the case is on the left-hand side, you see the data comes down to a ground station, that image is then processed and put into some sort of online portal or online platform. Then the analysis from that is then pushed out to a farmer or to the end user. But often the case, if they've spoken to the farmer, they'll find out that they don't have a lot of knowledge with the technology or with satellite imagery. They may have limited access to internet, so they can't even log on to the platform or download satellite imagery. And they may have kind of a low budget or low funds to pay for the service. They might not be able to afford it. So often the case is not give them this amazing shiny platform in which they can do everything on it. It's often understand what they're trying to do. And maybe it's as simple as just the platform sends the farmer a text message on his phone, because he can receive text messages in rural and areas with low connectivity. And that is enough as a service to give him an alert when he should harvest his crops, or whether there's a weather warning, or whether there's any other sort of issue in terms of what he's trying to achieve as part of that challenge. So in conclusion, I often kind of hear from a lot of people, design is all about aesthetics. Of course, design is about the way things work with a person, but it's not about how it looks. Design is all about how it works. It's about the way that you work with your end user to understand the optimum way to deliver a solution that meets that challenge or goal. And I'll finish with kind of mainly designers. We don't all just sit around discussing stuff all the time, drawing on walls and so on. We do a lot of sketching, we build a lot of prototypes, but we throw things away. We try again. Often the case is that you iterate. You kind of you have to be agile in this process, and if you're not, then you basically go 6 months down the line developing a solution and it doesn't quite work for that person. And I'll leave it there. But it was very nice to speak to everyone. And myself and Taya, as we said from the beginning, we're from a consultancy called Impactspace. And if you have any other questions or you do want to get in touch, the email and the website is up. and our LinkedIn and our Twitter is also up.
Great. Thank you so much, Fernando and Taya, for such an insightful presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. We've actually already got some questions coming through. So a reminder, if you're watching this on YouTube, please do send in your questions via the comment section below. And if you're here on Zoom, then send them through the Q&A. A question we had come in very early on in the talk from someone on YouTube is, what do you think are the top 1 or 2 things that the space industry could learn from designers such as yourself?
Should I go ahead and try to answer that? Number one thing is not to be so serious all the time. Like, honestly, we've had so many great experiences where we've just encouraged people to let go, to be silly, to say out ridiculous ideas that then lead to good ones. And I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of fear, and kind of people are holding back, whether it's the space industry or any kind of, serious industry. But we've discovered through our work, working with all these serious people, that actually, if you allow them to let go, they thoroughly enjoy it and they do see the value in it.
Why do you think there is that fear, though?
I think that times have changed.
Yeah.
I think that back in the days, there was a specific kind of more harsher image that you had to put up when you wanted to be a professional and climb the career ladder. Yeah. And I think as we moved into the 21st century, creativity is valued more and more, because the challenges have just become so complex that people realize that you as an individual can no longer just come up with great ideas anymore. You have to be able to communicate, to come up with, to ideate with other people, to collaborate. And it's much more of a kind of a joint effort of putting heads together and figuring stuff out together.
Great. What about you, Fernando? What do you think the space industry can learn from designers?
I think in general, to be more open to kind of disruption. So in space in general, everyone's quite waterfall. A piece of information will come in and it will kind of trickle down until everyone kind of does their actional task. Whereas designers are very much more kind of disruptive. We ask a lot of questions, and we don't really stop asking questions throughout the whole process. And I think that often causes some issues, because we don't want to always just move along after one session with a user. We want to understand as much as we can before we go anywhere near developing any solution. So often timelines can also be disrupted. And with designers in the industry, I think, you have to kind of understand, in other sectors, it works absolutely fine. But in space, you have very strict timelines. Yeah. So really, as a designer in the space industry, you have to kind of understand how to disrupt, but not over the top, but just kind of like push people in the right direction in a friendly way. You kind of do fun activities, and you kind of break people's barriers down, especially people that are at a high level. And then, as Taya said, they slowly enjoy it, they collaborate more, and they kind of see the benefit of it all.
Yeah, both of you mentioned like the space industry has been slightly rigid in terms of this new approach from designers over the past 10-15 years. Would you say that, do you think you've noticed a change or a development within the space industry working over the past 10-15 years in terms of people's mindset coming from the design background? And of course you have to work with people from all sorts of backgrounds in the space industry. Do you think they're a bit more accepting of it now and understand the approach, or do you still think there's some way to go?
I think that the new and the smaller players are more receptive.
Mm-hmm.
I think in large established organization, the change is slower.
Yeah.
But we have seen a change, and I do think that there's not many people like us in the industry. But for example, the Satellite Applications Catapult that we worked for has a whole team of user-centered designers, and I do think that organization and that team has influenced a lot of organization throughout those 5-6 years that the Catapult has existed.
Yeah.
So slowly by slowly, but yeah, the smaller the organization, the easier it is to reach to get that point across, I think. Yeah.
Okay, just based on that, there's actually another question coming based around the user-centered design is, and I know one of the designers on our team will reiterate this point, is that often users don't always know what they need. So do you think that there is still space for lean design frameworks within user-centered design, like specifically in the development and the space industry?
Yeah.
I mean, like with a lot of the kind of design methodologies and approaches, like if you take a lot of IDEO types, kind of methodologies and agile ways of thinking and approaching ways to engage with your user and collect information, what you'll often find is we never ask the user what they need.
Okay.
In developing projects, you don't really ask them what they need. You ask about their daily work, what they kind of interact with, how they feel about certain things. But I think often the case is that if you go to an end user and you ask them what they want, you may get the answer, which is, I'm not sure, or I don't know. But what you're trying to understand is what is the challenge or problem that's affecting them, so that you can come up with a creative process that would solve that challenge or problem. And I think, as designers, we're mainly facilitators. We're people that listen. We go out to these places, we speak with lots of people, but we're there to kind of listen as much as we can and take all the insights in, so that we can then basically start coming up with ideas around the best way to solve as many complex challenges as possible with one solution.
Yeah, I think that designers, or at least user-centered designers, do need a bit of quite a lot of understanding about psychology and anthropology. So there's like this famous anthropologist, Margaret Mead, who I think said that what people say, what people do, and what they say they do are completely different things.
Yeah.
So you can ask those questions, but you have to analyze the behavior, the body language, the context around them in order to make sense of it.
Well, based on that, let's talk a little bit more about Impactspace, and maybe I know you said you've only been around since the start of kind of the lockdown, so a really, really new company. But based on all those conversations, where have you might have come across in a project some of those things about understanding a user's needs?
Yeah, I think that that's kind of one of the biggest aspects of our work, that initial contextual understanding. So what we usually start with is building a framework for research, and that may comprise of desk research, user interviews, workshops, shadowing, which is basically you not even engaging with the person that much, but just sitting next to them and being with them and seeing what they do on a day-to-day basis, which is something that we used to do more before the COVID situation. But now everything's on remote methods at the moment, and it's more difficult to do remotely. And usually we take these findings and turn them into user personas. So they're kind of profiles that state some sort of an archetype of that person that is going to use your product or service.
Yeah.
And then work with the whole development team, with the product manager, developers, business owners, and get them on the same page as well. Get them to understand who they're designing for. So it's not just you, it's the whole team who needs to realize what the users can be receptive towards or not. Yeah, that's kind of prototyping and designing and testing comes second there. But I think that, you know, again, most of the people in the space industry completely like skip that first step. It's just onto, I think this is what we need to do. So do you like it? No? Should we change something?
I completely get what you mean, where you're coming from. Just a reminder to everyone who's tuned in tonight, do send in your questions via the comment section below or the Zoom Q&A. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about your backgrounds and how you kind of ended up what you're doing now, and why you have continued to work in the space industry. So Fernando, like what made you choose the space industry? Is it something you always wanted to do?
Sure, yeah. I think so. I started as an architect, and you know, I was always in love with architecture, but I was always more in love with design and the way that we interact with design. So it transferred through kind of different companies that I worked for, you know, doing either product design or graphics or wayfinding or branding. And kind of it led to a point where I saw an opportunity, which is the same place that Thea worked, which was the Satellite Applications Catapult. And you know, that was kind of eye-opening. You know, they were trying to apply a design methodology to sustainable development projects, and you know, they started this UK Space Agency fund in which they were working with developing countries, and I got involved in a lot of these projects, and it kind of set this passion for me to want to do more as a designer in this industry. And you know, that kind of led to working more in space and development of satellite application kind of services and products until I kind of moved to a company called Sen, who are doing video satellites, and I worked there for roughly just over a year as a head of design and user engagement. And I really got to engage with lots of different organizations, UN agencies, and so on, really understanding how satellite data could benefit them and trying to communicate that, and really trying to understand how to refine the products that we build around that. And, you know, it kind of got difficult because of COVID, and as I'm sure everyone has had some trouble over that kind of period, we still really wanted to work in sustainable development, and we decided that we wanted to form our own consultancy. And you know, we got to talk to a lot of kind of old friends and old colleagues from you know, working in the space industry now kind of like 7 years. You know, it's basically, you know, it's a friendship. You know, you've known a lot of people for a long time, worked on a lot of projects with them for a long time, and you know, you really want to kind of surround yourself with people that really want to help the world. And these are people that often really want to kind of use data from space to make an impact and save lives. And I think this is why we wanted to continue working in this, and just help as many of these projects as we could.
That's great. One of the things I read about both yourself, Fernando, and Thea, was that you've really been involved in like humanitarian support projects and development and disaster risk reduction projects. Especially yourself, coming from the design and architecture background, heading into the space industry, going into humanitarian support, how has that journey been?
It's interesting. I think if you take kind of architecture or design in general, there's often the same kind of process and methodology, which is speaking to your client or your user or anybody about what they're trying to kind of design or what they want. And I think, with humanitarian support and disaster risk, it's often really trying to understand the perception of those people that are in need of aid or support. And as technology has increased, it's just been amazing what you're able to do with satellite data, and really trying to work with organizations that have worked in humanitarian support and aid for so many years that there is benefits to using satellite imagery and data, but trying to understand the best way for them to use it, because often there's this barrier between the imagery and the complexity of analyzing it and processing it and using that information in their organization to communicate that out to their staff so they can take action. So often, you have to really understand and use all of that design training that you've had across those years, and you're better at engaging with people. You're better at talking through. You have a lot of empathy in everything that they do, and it often allows that communication to work a lot better.
Yeah, no, that's great. I personally also have realized the importance of kind of understanding the user journey. As an engineer, you're not, especially doing an engineering degree not so long ago, you're not really involved with the end user. And working with designers over the past year or so, it's honestly something that should be at the forefront of your mind rather than something that you think about later on and be like, oh, yeah, there's actually a person who actually has to use this product or service at the end. What about you, Taya? What about your journey into the space industry and what you're doing now?
Yeah, it's a very strange one, and
yeah, I know, that's why I ask.
I think that since I did say that, like, I did my bachelor's in fashion studies and moved into my master's to do a more general degree on design and engineering. It's a really cool new program in Estonia. I'm initially from Estonia, and it was really all about that human-centered design, bringing in together various engineers and various designers to work multidisciplinary on multidisciplinary projects. And it was a very kind of hands-on master's where I could work in various sectors and practical projects. And I stumbled into the space industry really by coincidence, because I wanted a cool job. I wanted a job with impact. So that sustainable development passion was always there for me. And, user interface design, user experience design is quite cool as well, but it's not really me quite. I need something more kind of more diverse, something more kind of broader, I guess. And I saw a job ad from Satellite Applications Catapult, and they're really notorious for hiring a lot of people that don't have space industry backgrounds. And I think that's why they are able to be the innovation hub that they are. Of course, for some roles, you do need that. There's no way around that. But if you can, business experts and so on, you have to have some sort of an interest, passion, willingness to learn, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that space industry background. So I got in, and ever since I've just been captivated, because it is a small sector, but it's a sector with so much potential and such a bright future ahead. And as a designer, there's so many opportunities to do diverse work. And of course, sometimes we design like just user interfaces and again that UX UI design. But as Fernando said, as well, and the question you asked before about the humanitarian work, oftentimes than not, it's about designing processes. It's about designing services, designing touch points. So you're looking at how different organizations fit in, how different people fit in, how different products fit in. And not only that, but also the training and the capacity building that comes with that. So yeah, it's full of opportunities, and I really feel like the projects that we've worked on so far have really acknowledged the added value that we've brought on board. So we wouldn't be sticking around if we didn't think that we were valuable for the sector. So I think that's a really good thing as well.
That's incredibly inspiring, and it's lovely to see that that you didn't start off thinking you were going to be in the space industry, and here you are working as a lead designer. I also see one final question for you, Taya, is you worked with like aerospace sector, agricultural sector, the legal, the apparel side of things. How do you think? What difference is there working within different sectors, within those different sectors, and now working in the space industry?
So I mean, there's differences, there's similarities, and I mean the work that I've done with the legal, agriculture, health, they've kind of been still with the space industry ties, so looking at various applications that could utilize space technologies. I mean, fashion is a fascinating world of its own, and very creative, kind of the exact opposite of the space industry. But even working with the legal industry was one of my most interesting experiences. There was a startup, Orbital Witness. They're doing really well now. They're based in London, and we used to work together with these three guys at the Satellite Applications Catapult, and they have this concept of like 10% time, where you can explore an idea from your work hours. And I started with them to look at potential space applications for the legal sector, and we went to work with some large legal bureaus in London, and it's really interesting to be the kind of link in between to not have all that space knowledge, but if you don't have that, you are more able to explain it to different types of users and to different audiences. So sometimes, and I love space sector engineers and Earth observation people. They're so clever and so lovely, but sometimes they really struggle with communicating, like, what's the value? How can you really use this?
Yeah, I think this is a common theme we come across. Every Thursday evening, we have the same discussion, and everyone says the same thing.
Must be true.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's great to hear your stories, guys. If you're here with us on YouTube or Zoom, once again, thank you so much for tuning in. We've had an incredible space talk with Fernando and Taya from Impactspace. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I certainly have. Thank you, Fernando and Taya, for spending time with us.
Thanks for inviting us. We really enjoyed it.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you, Fernando. Thank you, Taya. Thank you once again. If you have any questions, please do let us know in the comments below, and we'll try and answer them through social media later on. But remember, this is going to be available to view on YouTube. In case you missed it, share it with your friends and family. And also, if you're tuning in, let me remind you that Space Tour Live is actually doing a small survey right now. So we started Space Tour Live back in March, and since then we've been bringing space to you virtually, and we really want to try and up the game now. And the world is constantly changing around us with what's allowed and what's not allowed. But what we want to do is continue to bring space to you virtually. So there's a small survey. It's going to be in the description below. Please do spend 2 minutes of your time after this talk. Go fill it out, and it's really going to help us to understand how to improve our service in bringing space to everyone, everywhere, every day. Once again, thank you to Fernando for an incredible talk. We'll be back again on Tuesday at 7:30 p.m. with Nick and Terry's weekly roundup on the latest and greatest space news. Until then, stay safe, take care. It's good night from me.
Bye, thanks.
See you guys later.
Bye.
Bye.